Welcome back to A Shark's Perspective. In business, disruption seems to be one of the most common phrases and goals that we hear today. Every new company and entrepreneur believes that their goal for the marketplace is to be disruptive. But is that really true? Once you grow, then do you become stagnant and stop being disruptive and stop growing? It happens all the time. Charlene Li is named by Fast Company as one of the most creative people in business, a keynote speaker, the founder of Altimeter Group, a New York Times bestselling author of 6 books, including her newest, The Disruption Mindset, Why Some Businesses Transform While Others Fail, open leadership, as well as co-author of the critically acclaimed book, Groundswell. And on this episode, we'll discuss how to create a disruptive mindset, continue to grow, look at change within you and your organization, how to be a leader of change and not just a bull, or in my case, a bull shark in a china shop, better ways to look at your customers, creating the right strategy, and a lot more. So let's tune into a disruptive business leader with, as you know, a very disruptive shark on this episode of A Shark's Perspective. Charlene, thank you so much for joining us today on A Shark's Perspective. If you would, tell us a little bit about your background and your career today.
I am an author. I've been an analyst for 20 years. I am an entrepreneur, having started Altimeter and then sold it to a company called Profit, which is where I'm at today as a senior fellow.
So I got a chance to meet you after hearing you speak at Scott Brinker's MarTech conference. Your presentation was fantastic. But first of all, what did you think of the show in general?
Oh, I haven't been to MarTech in a long time. I love marketing technology, and it was kind of like coming back to my people in some ways, because it was like I didn't have to explain my geekiness, I guess. So that was really nice. It was so comfortable and fun to be there.
Yeah, it was just a great conference overall. It was a very impressive line for your book signing, by the way, which was always, I think, indicative. I've seen some speakers speak at conferences. They have a book signing and nobody's there, but you had a pretty impressive line. Why do you think that they asked you to speak there, though? And the reason I ask that is there's so many different, ad tech and MarTech vendors that are at conferences like that. They've all got the next disruptive technology, but at the same time, I don't know if they necessarily have the right disruptive mindset. And I'm just curious why you think they thought you were a good keynote speaker for that event.
Well, I think it's a little bit based on my previous work, to be honest. I wrote a book back in 2008 called Groundswell.
Yeah.
And people really liked that book a lot because it had helped people understand just this is how you think about social. And quite a few people at the conference were coming up like, oh, I wish I brought Groundswell for you to sign.
Mm-hmm.
And so the fact that book had changed so many people's perspectives, in some cases changed the course of their careers and their lives, was a major reason why, like, if I wrote something back then, maybe what I'm writing now could be interesting too as well.
Yeah.
So they gave me the benefit of the doubt.
Let's dive into the book a bit. A lot of entrepreneurs that I talk to today seem to wear disruption on themselves, in the sense that it was like Batman's logo on their chest. And, why do you think that is so important for brands coming up today to have that sort of mindset coming into that? Because I think one of the things that obviously we see is there are not enough large companies who think that way, but there seem to be so many entrepreneurs who just seem to be geared all in on the disruptive mindset.
Well, startups have nothing to lose.
Yeah.
They don't have any customers.
Right.
They don't have a brand. They don't have employees. So they can do whatever they want. But brands, you have a brand to protect. Think about the way we talk about brand reputation and all these things. We have customers who don't want to lose. We have employees who don't want to be pushed. There's just a lot of weight that organizations have as soon as they get to even like a little bit of a decent size. Disruption just gets harder once you reach about 10 people or so, honestly, because it means that you're going to change the ways that you're doing things to head in a different direction, with the belief that doing so will help you grow and be so much better at doing what you do. And I think it's important for organizations to constantly think about, how could I be better? How could I go faster? How can I accomplish my mission and my purpose in a more effective and more compelling way? because that's why we get up in the morning to go do these
Yeah.
things. It's not to do things exactly the same as we did before.
Well, not only, whether or not they have 10 employees or they get some sort of sea legs under them, if you will, but, help define, if you will, why brands need to be disruptive when looking at future customers. Because I think outside of just the way they define themselves with their infrastructure and the teams they create, then once they get into the certain set of customers, then that sort of kills a little bit of this disruptive mindset as well.
Hey, you're sitting around going, "Hey, we did it.
Yeah,
We got this.
exactly.
Yeah, we're here now. That
Put it
now
on
we can enjoy
autopilot
this,
and
right?"
never look up again. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, "Hey, we made it." And that's great, celebrate, but always be hungry for more, because the reality is where you are today is probably not where you can stay, and to be successful. This is the reality of business and frankly of the world. If you stay still, you will get left behind. So you can't rest on those current customers, no matter how beautiful they are. You need to say, "Thank you so much for being here. We're going to serve you really well. And now we got to go look for new customers." Because
Yeah.
if you're one of them, you're going to buy from me again. That's great, but you may not. I can't rely on that.
Well, how do you help? I mean, I like the pros and cons you defined in the book about future customers, but explain how someone should go about looking at their current customers as well.
Well, I think more than anything else, this whole idea of being customer centric, having customer experience,
Mm-hmm.
making customers the center of your business is a fundamental must do, table stakes thing you have to do. I don't think anybody will question that we're not trying to create great customer
No, no. The
experiences.
question seems to be whether or not they're actually doing it more than
Right.
whether or not they
And so,
agree with it.
right. So there's some execution issues there. But let's assume that you're doing a pretty good job of serving your current customers. Then knowing that your customer is changing and that there are new customers coming out, constantly scanning the environment to see where they are is an absolutely crucial skill for an organization. Where are my future customers? And knowing where they are will allow you to make the key sacrifices, the investments, hiring the right people to be able to go after those new customers.
I'd love for you to kind of unpack a little bit some different ways on focusing on future customers then, and that's it. Kind of started off with placing your customers in dashboards, but kind of elaborate a little bit further on those 5 ways to focus on them.
Sure. I think that the first one is to put your customers in your dashboard, because if you're not looking at your dashboards, the things that you measure, whether you're doing things right or not on an everyday basis, then it's so easy to lose sight of who your customers are. So look at your dashboard, your KPIs, your success metrics, whatever they are, not just for you as a leader, but for everybody in the organization. Are your customers reflected in everybody's metrics?
Mm-hmm.
And it gets a little harder when you go, well, that person doesn't ever talk to a customer. Let's say it's somebody in finance or in procurement. Uh, they do eventually talk to the customer. So think about what metrics really do matter to them. I didn't put this in the book, but somebody was at NASA visiting them when they were doing the whole moonshots and everything. And he came across a janitor and said, "Hey, so what do you do here?" He goes, "I'm putting a man on the moon. What about you?"
Mm-hmm.
So when everybody's aligned around who that customer is, what their mission is, it really gives people a centering moment to understand, what are they here for? What are we trying to do, really? So that's one way. I think another way is to create what I call empathy maps. It's one thing to describe your customers with titles and jobs and responsibilities, but that's not really knowing your customer. So an empathy map says, here's your customer. What do they say? What do they do? What do they think? And how do they feel? Because when you can understand who they are as people, then you can begin to create great experiences for them. Think about the products and services for them. But you can't do that without having that fuller picture, because those four things, they are different from each other. What we
Right.
say, what we do, think, and feel are completely different. So it doesn't make sense sometimes, but that's the way the world works around the future. I think about customer advisory boards as a really good thing to create, and not a board of your best customers, but frankly, the ones who complain a lot.
Yes,
The ones
agreed.
who you think are going to push you into this future, who represent your future customers. And I do think it's important to uh, find the employees who are the most customer focused. These are the people who talk about the customer all the time, who think about, well, how can I actually um, be serving those customers the most? And I think that the last area is to define your customer with what I call research, not hearsay. It's
Mhm.
one thing for one person to say, this is what I think the customer looks like. Well, let's go and see if that's really true. And so you get away from this bias that the highest paid person in the room, the executives, think they know who the customers are, but do they really? And you can have a model of who that customer is based on real data.
Yeah, and that's a perfect way to pivot into chapter 4, because this is a question that I think about a lot, is developing disruptive leaders, but really sort of kind of pivot off that a little bit. It's when you look at trying to, just the group you spoke at Martech East. I mean, not everybody in there was a CMO or a C-suite executive, obviously, like most conferences. There are a lot of people that at the ground floor want to disrupt and feel the need to disrupt, and they're having to argue up rather than argue down. And when I sort of say that, I think what I'm trying to position is, how do you help enable some of those future leaders to help their organizations become more disruptive without just sort of necessarily being a nuisance to the C-suite who wants to do the status quo.
Well, there are two things about disruptive leaders that they do really well that make them distinct from other types of leaders. First of all, they have a really strong change of they have a really strong mindset to openness to change. They think that change is a really positive thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then they also have really strong leadership behaviors that empower and inspire people. And they're basically really good at creating movements, because you are going to have a movement to carry you through all the tough times ahead on your disruption journey. And so disruptive leaders, you can develop those two skills no matter where you are in the organization. And being able to systematically say, how do I create challenge? How do I think about putting these situations in front of me and my team and be able to go through them? How do I make sure that people are aligned? How do I increase my leadership skills, being consistent about saying where we're going to go? So these are all things that you can do today. Um, but I also feel like the disruption that needs to happen could happen exactly where you are. The the need for agency, the sense that you can be completely accountable for your actions, whether they're good or bad, whatever the outcomes are, is something that you don't have to wait for somebody to say, I empower you to go forth and disrupt.
Sure.
Disruptors see the change that needs to happen. And frankly, it's what good leadership is in the end, is disruptive, because leaders create change. And if you're not creating change, then you're not a leader, you're a manager. And I think that's the difference, is how do I step into the place of opportunity? Where can I see that change that needs to happen? And begin to develop my confidence and my ability to create that change.
When I think about this, there's so many different forces, internal and external, that force companies to remain stagnant in that lack of change mindset for a lot of especially the bigger ones. What did you find in your research was really the biggest force that kept them trapped in the way they were? Was it economic? Was it culture? Was it, employees?
You know, when I do my workshops with my clients, the number one thing I hear from them is, we don't have permission. And I'm looking around at the executive team. I mean, these are the top 20
Right.
executives in the organization, going, who are you waiting for permission
Yeah.
from? Right. And when you dig down deeper into it, the reason why they haven't given themselves permission to do this is that their entire careers, their entire lives has been about meeting the goals, hitting the goals, getting the A on the report card. And if you extend yourself out to a place where I may not hit that goal, well, that would be seen as failure then. But this is the thought exercise I say to them. You set your goal as 100% and you're going to meet that, great. If you set your goal as 200%, just something crazy, right? 2x where you are today, what would you do differently? And they have the entire list. They know exactly what they would do differently if they wanted to hit the 200%. But they said we wouldn't hit it. We wouldn't get there. We get like 50% of the way there. I go, but wait a minute. You'd be at 150% instead of 100%. Wouldn't you be better off?
Mm-hmm.
So I think in many ways, hitting goals is really bad for disruption. The mindset that we're going to set ourselves stretch goals and not meet them is intolerable. But I think we'd be so much better off if we could do that.
Yeah, this is the reason why I am probably considered a shark in a china shop. Maybe not. Maybe a bull shark in a china shop. Uh, I think sometimes people like me push disruption too hard, and I'm wondering if you have any opinions on what is too much disruption for a company.
Well, this is a little exercise you can do. Uh, Put yourself on a scale of 1 to 10. One being you don't like disruption at all. You like
11.
things to be exact. 11, and you're
Yeah,
at 11.
yeah.
10, you're out there.
Before the
And
question's
then,
even asked, yes.
exactly, you're like on the 11 scale. Um, and then look at your organization. Where are they at? Where is your team at? And there'll be a spectrum of what that number looks like. And here's the thing is that if your organization is a 3 and you're a 4, you're going to be disruptive. You're going to be pushing people out of their comfort zone all the time, right? But if you're an 8 and your organization is like a 9, you're the laggard. So if you're an 11 working in organizations that's 2, they're not going to know what to do with you. You're like on a totally different planet. And if you're an 11 though, and you're working with 9s and 10s, it's going to be like, wow, this person is moving us in a direction that we don't want to, but we can see ourselves going in that direction. So I speak with a lot of disruptors out there who feel like they're banging their head against the wall, not making progress. They go, what do we do? And I say, exercise the power of 2 feet and leave. Because you're clearly not being effective. They don't know what to do with you. Go to a place that will know what to do with you and be really conscious about the type of change that you want to create and make that change happen in a place that will actually benefit from it. There's nothing worse than being a disruptor and not seeing the change happen. It's incredibly soul sucking. And there's so much change that needs to happen today. So many opportunities out there. I think finding a place that will actually make that change happen would be the place where you would just feel so much more fulfilled.
One of the things you said, and I liked in an earlier chapter, and I'd love to know if you'd unpack it a little bit, is you said in this way, disruption strategy is no different than traditional strategy. How do you mean that, and how does somebody take that traditional strategy and make it more disruptive?
Well, I get this. Traditional strategies are simply this. They say, we're here today, we want to go there tomorrow, and this is how we're going to get there. So a disruption strategy just says where we want to go tomorrow is kind of a crazy goal.
Yeah.
So it's a much bigger goal than you are normally used to. And it's still the same. We're here today, this is where we want to go tomorrow, and this is how we're going to get there.
Mm-hmm.
So that is a truism of any strategy. It says we could do anything in the world. We can't do everything. So what will we do? So, but it's the key difference though is that a lot of strategy processes that I see today, they're not true strategies. They're kind of planning exercises. They're saying how we're going to put together a budget for the next 12 months to get what we want done. That's not truly a strategy. A strategy looks out a couple years, knowing that in order to get to that point a couple years from now, we need to make some choices today and some investments today. So if your strategy document is only 1 year long, that's not a strategy, it's a budget. And you really need to sit down and go through a traditional strategy process to say, how was what we were going to do not only create the outcomes we want today, but also the outcomes we want someplace in the future.
Agreed. Who do you believe are examples of the companies that you see that are brands that we know of that are being disruptive frequently that are succeeding?
Well, I would use two examples. Um, One is you have the usual suspects like Google, Facebook,
Sure.
etc. But I look at Netflix, and one of the things they do so well in an incredibly competitive space is to constantly change up what they do. They went from red envelopes to streaming, went from streaming to content production. Now they're getting into more gaming and a whole bunch of other things. So they're constantly reinventing themselves because frankly, customers keep moving ahead.
Yeah.
So that's one of the reasons why they're so compelling and in an incredibly difficult, challenging space. They are not guaranteed to be successful in the future.
No.
They do not have the network effects like a Facebook or a Google does with this incredible search engine revenues that they
Hmm.
have. Their success is not guaranteed. So that's why they are so aggressive and so focused on the future and what customers want. So that's kind of a darling of the tech world. But one of my favorite companies, and I close the book out with this case study, is Southwest Airlines.
Hmm.
They've been around for almost 50 years. And for the past 46 consecutive 46 years, they have been profitable. And they continue to grow. They grew from a startup airline to being the largest airline in the United States. They carry more people, more miles than any other carrier in the United States. And yet they remain this maverick, this company that doesn't do things like every other
Yeah.
company. And they are doing this, well, again, being incredibly profitable when other people really struggle. So, what are they doing? What are they doing right year after year to be able to sustain this? And I think that in the end is the mark of a disruptive organization, that you can sustain that kind of disruptive growth, profitable growth year after year after year. You stay fresh. They stay fresh because they are 100% focused on their customers.
Yeah.
Everything is aligned around their customers.
Both great examples. And Netflix is one of those ones, to your point. I speak at a lot of advertising and marketing conferences and often about TV and Netflix. And I don't know of a better version of a company that is constantly pivoting well when everybody says they're on their last leg and it's gloom and doom, and then they do something new. And I think this year they're investing in $15 billion worth of original content. And they started out with nothing. I mean, they it's not like they started out with hit shows, but they've done so much with streaming, with binge watching. It's just amazing how when you look at how they're disrupting the entire TV mindset in the industry and how we look at that.
Right. Have you ever seen the culture deck
Yeah,
from Netflix?
yeah.
Yeah, it's like 180 pages of glorious culture written out for everybody to see, and that is that's the foundation of why they're such a great company.
So how do people prepare themselves to take that big gulp moment? Because I've really enjoyed that chapter. I don't know that most people obviously are hit with that big gulp moment by starting it on their own way. Because of some other disruption that's happened to them is when they take that big gulp moment, if you will. How should someone create that moment for themselves to take a big gulp moment?
The big up moment comes when you're facing a hard choice. I can see what I have to do. I can see what the future holds. But what I have to do in the moment is incredibly terrifying. I mean, it's just like terrifying. The blood is draining out of your face just thinking about doing this. It's incredibly risky. And you literally need to take a big gulp, hold on to the hands of the rest of the members of your team and say, we're going to jump into this together now, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's no turning back. And, and a part of me says, you don't get to do that until you take little gulp moments along the way, because this takes a bit of practice. It takes a lot of fortitude and trust in the people around you, and also in yourself that you're making the right decision. So I think that one of the things to do to prepare yourself is to take lots of little gulps along the way. And then the other thing is to make your case, to do your homework, to run the scenarios, have the contingency plans. The people who make the big gulp moments, they're saying, okay, what's the worst case scenario that we could have here? Okay, that worst case scenario is pretty worst case. How do we mitigate that risk? But we're still going to go forward with this. The examples I have in the book are two very different companies. Adobe, when they moved from packaged software to cloud, and then Southern New Hampshire University, they had to make a big bet and really go into online learning with a significant ad buy to catapult their way into the market. They both did it. They never looked back. Absolutely terrifying for them to do this. And I think that's my message to disruptors who think, I'm ready to go do this. Like, let's go do this. There will come a time when you will doubt yourself to your core. And you're just going to be like, what am I doing? This is crazy. But you look at all the evidence in front of you, like, we got to do this.
Well, I would encourage anybody to buy this book. I think it's a fantastic book. And I know some people will listen to the show and they'll want to go buy the book tomorrow and they're ready to cause disruption. But help define too what disruption is not to you. When is it not a good time to be disruptive? Because I don't want everybody to run out there and light a fire and become Sherman.
Yeah, I think disruption, when you blow things up but don't put them back together again, is a bad idea.
Exactly.
I know a lot. And also, if you go out there and you wave your arms around a lot, get everybody rolled up and hyped up and then walk off the stage and don't do anything about it is also a bad idea. Disruptors are in some ways kind of quiet. They are saying, this is where we need to go. This is where we see the opportunities are. Let me lay out the case.
Yeah.
And this is how I think we can get there. And no, it's not guaranteed. I know it's going to be hard, but I think we can get there, and this is how. And that quiet confidence, I think, can go so much further than all the bluster and bang on the table. We got to go. Because unless you can show this is how it's actually feasible, this is how we could actually accomplish this. And yeah, it's going to be really hard and we won't always succeed, but we'll be better off going on this journey than staying still.
Well, the reason I asked that is I was sitting there and I got up after your presentation and two guys got up and were walking. As they were walking out, they said, "That was great." I'm paraphrasing. They said, "That was great. Now we've got to go make change." And I thought, oh Lord, they're going to be inspired by this and, light fires when they get back to the office. But, I think people still need to think through it. And I'm sure they were thinking about it more clearly than just that one phrase overheard as they were walking out. But not everybody necessarily, like you said, has to blow it up to where they can't put the pieces back together. So what is the reason why you're going on podcasts and speaking at a lot of conferences? Because podcasts in general are not great transactional places for you to sell 1,000 more books. But what was the reason for you to want to do this?
Well, I already have a bestseller, so
Yeah.
I don't need to get another one. So my goal here in writing this book wasn't to sell a lot of books. It was to create a movement around disruption.
Mm-hmm.
I believe so strongly that there is a need for huge amounts of change, not only in our organizations, but also in our communities and in our society. And in order for that change to happen, we need more people to see themselves as disruptors, the people who can lead and create that change. So my purpose on being this podcast, Shark, is to talk to your audience and hopefully encourage them to see themselves as disruptors and to create that change.
Such a great point. So, Charlene, you signed my book, The Disruptive Mindset Made Out to Shark. So you're on a shark's perspective. I must ask, what is your favorite kind of shark and why?
I love leopard sharks because
Nice.
I live in the Bay Area and
Yeah.
I see them all the time in the water. I get very excited when I see one because it's an indication that the water is getting clean. So when I see a shark, that means our environment is getting better, cleaner, stronger.
Now, if we could just fix all the rest of the pollution on the land too,
Yeah.
that would help in California a little bit. So, well, Charlene, it's a special time in the show. Are you ready for the 5 most interesting and important questions you're going to be asked today?
Okay, let's go for it.
Since you live out in California, you spoke in Boston, I got to ask you, Martech East or Martech West?
Oh, Martech East because it's in Boston and my kids are in Boston. I can go
Oh,
see
nice.
them.
Good for you. Number 2, writing. Now, we're not talking about the money you make from it, but writing books or speaking at conferences.
Oh, speaking at conferences, easily. So much more fun.
Nice. All right, number 3, Martech or ad tech?
Oh, Martech, for
That
sure.
was a little bit of a softball. All right, number 4, San Francisco Giants or the San Francisco 49ers?
Giants.
Not bad. And the number 5 and the most important question you're going to be asked today is biscuits or cornbread?
Oh, cornbread.
Okay, no doubt. All right, Charlene, where can people find out more about you, get a copy of the book, follow your thought leadership, and more?
Best is to come to my website. It's simply charleneli.com. And I am also on all the various social media channels. Would love to be able to connect with people and hear what they're doing on their disruption journeys.
Charlene, it's been an honor to have you on the show. Thank you very much for being with us today on A Shark's Perspective.
Thank you so much, Shark.
So there was my conversation with Charlene Li, named by Fast Company as one of the most creative people in business, a keynote speaker, the founder of Altimeter Group, a New York Times bestselling author of 6 books, including her newest, The Disruption Mindset, Why Some Businesses Transform While Others Fail, open leadership, as well as co-author of the critically acclaimed book, Groundswell. Let's take a look at 3 key takeaways from our conversation with her. First, think about change and how that affects you and your organization. Quite simply, disruption becomes harder and harder as your company gets bigger. It's more resistant, less flexible. You're carrying much more weight as you grow, and you're less likely to disrupt after you've gained a few customers. You do this with the belief, as she said, by doing so, that will help you grow and do so much better at what you do. But we know that often becomes untrue because businesses become stagnant. As she aptly points out, you have to ask the questions she mentions, and I quote, how could I be better? How could I go faster? How can I accomplish my mission and my purpose in a more effective and more compelling way? Great points. That's why we need disruption. Start creating a disruptive mindset and start with a strategy. Second, the teams and structure you create today do not necessarily reflect the needs of your future customers. And I love that point. You've got to be nimble and ready to change and not simply rest on those current customers you think are completely loyal. The problems for those customers are often quicker to evolve than your brand is, so you better keep evolving to help over-deliver. Be disruptive for what they need today and what they will need tomorrow. That again requires a disruptive mindset that doesn't sit still, and you need to help develop future leaders to become more disruptive, who are, as she said, good at making movements because they're positive about change and motivating people to move in that direction. It's not helpful to the organization or the customer if your C-suite executive needs to raise their hands for permission, so to speak, just because they're afraid to rock the boat with improvements. Third, I saw her deliver a great keynote, and she does a great job of laying out 5 ways to focus on customers better. 1, put customers in your dashboard and go look at your metrics, KPI success metrics. Are your customers reflected in everybody in your organization's metrics? When everybody's aligned around the same focus, then your dashboard's probably telling the right and full story. 2, she talks about empathy maps. When you understand who your customers are as people, then you can understand better how to service them. 3, develop customer advisory boards with people, not just your biggest fans, but people who will also push you. 4, find the employees who are the most customer focused. And 5, define your customer with research. This helps get the highest paid person out of the way of being the only major decider in the customer experience. And a rare 4th, I love her goals. It was not to sell a lot of books. She doesn't need to anymore with New York Times bestsellers. I really enjoyed her reason, and I quote, it was to create a movement around disruption. I believe so strongly that there is a need for huge amounts of change, not only in our organizations, but also in our communities and our society. And in order for that change to happen, we need more people to see themselves as disruptors, the people who can lead and create that change. Got a question? Send me an email to kenneth@asharksperspective.com. Thank you for the privilege of your time. Don't be afraid to be disruptive. Take some little gulps and then a big gulp. Jump into the water because sharks keep swimming. Always be hungry for more. And join us on the next episode of A Shark's Perspective.